Tadhg joins us now on the mother of all talk shows. Tadhg, thanks very much. I've seen your, how shall I put it, a controversial work. It didn't seem controversial to me at all. It seemed to me to describe perfectly the lunacy of the Israeli action since October 8th. I'm wondering for you how difficult it is, because there ain't many laughs around right now, brother. I don't remember actually the last time I laughed. How you manage to find humor that can be used to demonstrate a wider and deeper point.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Big fan of you, big fan of the show. I feel like with satire, it's got a role to play in all of this because it does the exact opposite of what we're always told, I think, with a lot of conflicts, but particularly with this conflict, which is that it's very complicated. You know, I think that's part of the Zionist propaganda, that it's very complicated, so you and I should stay out of it. And I think what satire does is it does the exact opposite. It kind of brings people in. It kind of tries to strip back what's supposedly too nuanced for the average person to understand, and it simplifies it into a little analogy or a little allegory. So, for example, in a sketch I did that showed the Western powers greeting the Ukraine at a moment where the Ukraine has been invaded, and it's trying to get the guy out of his house. He's knocking him back. He's looking for weapons. He's looking for support. And the EU and America are absolutely gushing about it. I feel the Palestinian situation is very close to that. It's got an awful lot of comparison to that situation. And in my sketch, the Palestine figure is roundly denounced. He's kicked out. He doesn't get anything. And in fact, the Western powers decide that they are going to support the actual oppressor. And that is very close to reality, but I think it's also, in a really dark, weird way, it's also kind of funny. So I think, like, comedians and satirists come into their own in these dark times anyway. I'm personally struggling to find anything funny about what's going on, but I think satire is more than just funny. It's hopefully holding a mirror up to nature. And there's a moment happening right now, which you described so eloquently in your intro, where the Western powers and everything that we feel we stand for in terms of being some kind of paragon of moral virtue, it's all crumbling. And I think satire has a huge role to play as it lampoons the falling position of the West as this kind of moral paragon or guide for the world.
Satire is difficult. As they said, satire died when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize. It's been murdered many times since. But I felt that Netanyahu lecturing Macron on morals was definitely worthy of your sharp pen, Tadhg.
Yeah, well, again, like, that was a brilliant example, but I feel generally the Israeli propaganda machine at the moment, if it wasn't so desperately sad and frustrating, it is also hilarious. Like, the way in which they are gaslighting on a kind of a global scale is just extraordinary to me. And they're kind of insulting our intelligence at this point, I think. You know, like, to produce a copy of Mein Kampf in Arabic from underneath the bed of one of the children that they've slaughtered. It's like something out of a Chris Morris satire. It's really like, it's very hard to match that level of ludicrousness. And yet they are presenting this as if it is compelling fact, and it's just legitimizing the war crimes, I think. And I'm sure we'll get to this in a moment, but that has been the history of colonialism. You know, it's always that way, where you kind of try to monstrify your opponent. You try to make them evil with associations with, in this case, Nazism, that they're in some way different to you and I. And you need that. You need, if you're going to kill people on an industrial scale, as you said, 10, 11,000 people in 4 weeks, you can't get away with that unless you turn them into a lesser being than you or I. And that's what they're attempting to do. And I think we need to push back against it. Each and every time you see it, just call it out.
Well, that's a very good segue, because it leads me perfectly to the question. of why is opposition in Ireland to what the Israelis are doing more or less hegemonic, give or take the odd top-notcher in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael?
Like, I think there's an understanding in Ireland. I mean, I'd like to actually publicly give you a compliment here now, not just because I'm on your show and you invited me on your show, but like I remember seeing you or hearing you talk about the north of Ireland. And genuinely, it was one of the first times I heard somebody from the UK on UK television describing the north in a nuanced way, you know, without trying to create baddies and goodies, you know, that you had a deep understanding of the fact that that conflict is extremely nuanced, and it's based primarily in colonialism. So I think like the Irish Palestinian understanding is based on the fact that no matter what the Israeli propaganda machine tries to tell you, this isn't really an overly complicated conflict. It's about land. Primarily, it's about land. It's about settler colonialism, and it's the ever encroaching, constantly growing Israeli incursion into Palestinian land. And if there's any country on earth that would understand that, I feel like it is Ireland. We've also had our land taken away from us. We've also had an attempt for our culture and our language and our way of life to be obliterated because the oppressor felt that they were ethnically superior to us. We relate to all that. We've also been labeled terrorists. We can also identify with the oppressor obfuscating and denying justice. Like friends of mine in the north are actually going through that right now, where, as you know, the legacy bill will mean that people in the north who are victims of state-sponsored murder will probably never have justice now, because the British have basically locked the files away and never to be seen again, or on, you know, in 20 or 30 or 40, 50 years time. So I think there's something about this conflict that Ireland gets in a way that the so-called great European powers, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, don't get, because they've never been the colonized, really. They've never been the oppressed. They've always been the oppressors, so they don't get it. Even right up to the idea of dehumanization. So we see at the moment, we've even seen in the Washington Post that racist cartoon that depicts Palestinians as, again, kind of monsters, terrorists with no value on human life, willing to sacrifice their children as human shields. It's straight out of the colonial playbook. Like, we used to have, as you well know, Punch magazine, you know, used to depict Irish people as kind of monsters, ape-like, and that again was a means for the British to carry out their atrocities and to legitimize them, that we were in some way inferior. So I think we just smell a rat about this whole thing in a way that the rest of Europe probably doesn't. And it's solidarity with substance. That's why you see people on the streets. That's why I do what I do, because I feel like it's my duty out of a sense of solidarity. It's great to kind of say, oh yeah, I support Palestine, but you have to be active about it. Like, there's a genocide happening right now. You don't want to be sitting on the sidelines for this. Like, my sense of duty to my Palestinian brothers and sisters and friends would be stronger than my desire to keep a paid partnership with fucking Toyota or whatever, you know.
Well, on to that, the powers moved against you pretty quickly because of the strength and the popularity, the accuracy of your satire. You felt the hammer coming down on top of you. Tell us what happened and where you've survived, where people can follow you.
Yeah, to be fair now, it's so I've been a lot of my videos are removed from TikTok because there's a kind of a campaign to get stuff removed. But I'm very lucky because it seems like I've got enemies in high places, but I seem to have friends in high places too, because the videos have since been restored. The usual backlash that I get in connection with these videos is like something that I would normally receive anyway in Ireland, because my stuff is always political, and in the south of Ireland we can be a bit squeamish about anti-colonialism. It's kind of weird, like the ruling class in the south of Ireland are a little bit more squeamish about taking the mick out of the Brits than actually the Brits are. Like, most of my following like is in the UK from lefties that are like really open to the idea of anti-imperialist thinking and satire and stuff, but So I'm well used to being censored and whatnot, but it's from the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, like over the course of the last few weeks, somebody purporting to be a Zionist witch put a spell on me. But I've since had that spell undone, I think, because a lot of Muslim people reached out and they undid it. What was interesting about so I did this sketch depicting the situation as a kind of somebody who's been stung by a bee, and in order to gain, revenge against the bee, they burn the house down that the bee flies into. So I just thought it was interesting the criticism I got for it was about reducing the attacks on October 7th to a bee sting. But I also reduced what's happening to Palestine and Palestinians, genocide, ethnic cleansing, Holocaust, you described it as. I reduced that to one burnt out house, and I didn't get one single complaint. So I just thought it was interesting that there seems to be a hierarchy. There isn't parity of esteem when it comes to taking the mick out of the two communities. One is very quick to jump in as if they're a more venerable group of people than the other. And also I'd say you got to look at that sketch in the round as well, that like what I'm actually doing in the sketch is I'm trying to take the piss out of the idea that this would be in any way a legitimate response, that you would burn a house down to get revenge over a bee. And I think that's how satire works. But to answer your question, I suppose.
We'll come back to you, but let's make a British-Irish comparison here. The bombing, the Irish Republican Army's bombing of the cavalry and the horse guards parade. The British answer it by levelling every dwelling in Derry or in West Belfast, and slaughtering every man, woman and child within those houses. That's what has happened in the case of Gaza in the last 5 weeks. And to be fair to the British, what didn't happen when the IRA bombed the cavalry in the presence of the Queen?
Absolutely. I think I made a similar comparison at the start of this, that, it would be like, as you say, like carpet bombing Belfast during one of the IRA attacks on the mainland. And I think we both know the reason that didn't happen and that wouldn't happen is because we're white. Irish people are white, and it would never be accepted. Though the British might have thought that they were ethnically superior to us throughout the centuries, they've had to put that idea away now. And we're white, we're closer to the Ukrainians. You won't get away with that. But when it comes to brown and black people, the West has proved time and time again that there's a hierarchy of importance, and they're way, way down the list. They don't matter. I mean, like, just one quick point on the idea of the terrorist and the freedom fighter thing again, which I think Irish people identify with. Like, if an alien landed on Earth at the moment and you presented him with the facts of the matter in Gaza, and you said, this one group at the moment are bombing indiscriminately hospitals, schools, they've killed UN workers, they've killed media representatives, they've killed mostly women and children, and they're up to 11,000 murders in a month. You would forgive that alien for assuming that that was the terrorist. But actually, we're led to believe by mainstream media that that's the government who are using precision targeting, and they're minimizing human casualties. And the terrorists are the guys who broke out of their concentration camp and committed. And as you said at the start, we still don't know. It's incredible that we still don't know the details of what actually happened on October 7th. And yet there was this ferocious genocidal response to it. I just think that's unfathomable. That you could launch that type of war without the facts of the matter. People are accusing me all the time online, for instance, like just a quick example of being an apologist for rape and beheading babies. And as you pointed out at the start of your show, there's no evidence. There's no evidence for that at all. So if it wasn't so horrific, it would be funny.
Yeah. Tell us how we can watch you, Tadhg.
Thank you so much. So yeah, if you just go to tadghhickey.com, I've got a book out at the moment about a memoir about my alcoholism. It's called A Portrait of the Piss Artist as a Young Man. I've got tour dates coming up next year. But actually, do you know what? The main thing I'd like to plug is I've got a fundraiser for Gaza. So if you go to like at Tadhg Hickey on Twitter or at Tadhg Hickey CML on Instagram, I'm constantly posting about this fundraiser. It's at 11,000 at the moment. I'd love to get it to 20,000. And then I'm donating to the Irish Red Cross, who work directly with the Red Crescents on the ground in Gaza. So I'd love some support on that.